Welcome to Wireless LAN Weekly, a podcast focused on the wireless networking professional. We aim to educate, inform, entertain, and inspire. Get ready to listen and enjoy. Now to our host of the show, Keith Parsons.
Hello again. I'm glad you were able to join us again for Wireless LAN Weekly. This is Keith Parsons, and I'll be your host for the show today. Today's show has a special section. In our technical section today, we'll be having Jennifer Huber. And Jennifer will be talking to us about her experience in the CCIE Wireless Lab. We'll be glad to have Jennifer with us for that. And for the soft skills, we have, again, Ed Schlichtenmyer will be back with us, and Ed will be talking to us about enhancing your reputation. I've worked with Ed for a long time, and he is one who has definitely a good reputation in our industry, and we can learn a lot from Ed. So on with the show.
Today's wireless networking definition from the CWNP Dictionary of Wireless Terms and Acronyms.
Wireless LAN profile. A wireless LAN profile is a group of settings within the 802.11 WLAN controller that characterizes the parameters needed for a client station to connect to the network infrastructure wirelessly. For example, you can use authentication type, the cipher suite, quality of service, VLAN, radius parameters, the ESSID, and protocol filters. All of these can be configured as a group of WLAN profile parameters, and a WLAN controller may have many such profiles configured simultaneously. The purpose of WLAN profiles is to simulate many independent wireless LANs within a single wireless LAN infrastructure.
Rant, pet peeve, what really bugs you? 60 seconds of complaining starts now.
This is Ben Miller, and something that really bugs me is Wi-Fi client utilities that don't show you a signal strength as a number, that show you the little signal bars. It just seems like such an easy thing. It seems like it can't be that hard to just develop the software so that there's a little number beside it. It'd be so much more useful for using those tools to do your surveying and getting people connected and everything like that. So that's kind of what really bugs me.
Things every wireless LAN professional needs to know. Gear up, buckle down, and stand by for the real techie stuff.
Hello again, this is Keith Parsons. In today's episode, we'll be talking with Jennifer Huber. She's a Wi-Fi engineer, but more importantly, for the discussion we'll be having today, she just got back from, Sunnyvale, right?
It's actually San Jose.
San Jose, close enough, for the CCIE Wireless Lab exam, and she went and sat that, and we'll have a little bit of discussion about her preparation for that and her experience at the lab. And of course, she signed some NDAs on there, so obviously can't hear everything that she did, but the stuff that's outside the NDA, we should have a nice discussion. So how are you today, Jennifer?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm great. It's a nice, today's a Saturday. When this gets published, they always get published on a Wednesday, so we'll put it out on a Wednesday. So let's start with your experience. Well, first, why did you want to get a wireless CCIE?
I have always wanted to have a set of numbers from Cisco. I remember reading a couple of years back when there was murmurings about there being a CCIE for the wireless, and I said, yes, this is so me. I can't wait to do this. And it's been a long time coming, and I'm dead set mentally that this is going to happen this year. I will pass this lab because I've been wanting this for so long. Because for me, having a set of CCIE numbers, especially for a woman in IT, especially, that for me is like instant street cred. That puts a line in the sand where you have instant street respect by a whole host of people that work for Cisco or don't work for Cisco. Anybody that's in IT knows what a CCIE is. And granted, there's probably a pretty good number of CCIEs that just pass the test and can't do much after that. Because they're just really good test takers, or they've taken it so many times, they're bound to break through eventually. But for me, this has been a long time coming because I've been doing pretty much nothing but wireless since about 2002, back in the day when the Cisco access points were the little turquoise metal boxes, the AP350s that ran BXWorks. And I'm glad those are gone. But so I've been doing this for a long time, so I bring a lot of past work history and work experience into finally being able to sit the lab. And it was really exciting just to be able to go do what I've always wanted to do for so long. And yeah, I didn't pass, but that's okay because I think the pass rate the first time is maybe 1%. So I didn't really think that I was going to pass anyways. But I did better than I thought. And I actually got a really good second lab date in March. Originally it was August, but a little birdie told me, said, hey, there's a lab date, go grab it. And I was able to get an earlier date in March. So I'm under the 90-day window. I had to pay for it immediately. That was kind of painful. But I'm raring to go. And I'm so glad I don't have to wait till August to do it again.
That's good. Did you ever think of getting like a routing and switching CCIE first?
No, I don't really have a whole lot of experience with routing and switching. I mean, I've done some setting up VLANs and trunks and native VLANs and doing some really basic network configurations to support a wireless network. But all of the networks that I've been involved in at employers have already been set up, so I didn't have the opportunity to set up something fresh. So I didn't really have a whole lot of experience with it. And I saw wireless as a niche that I could fit into really well because a lot of IT people don't want to do it because it involves a lot of walking and a lot of real work. And the people that do routing and switching are usually cross-legged in a comm room somewhere. And it would be really hard pressed to get them to come up off their duff and go do a site survey with me somewhere. So it's kind of like they didn't want it, so I took it and ran with it, and here I am.
Well, let's back up a little bit then. And for those who might not know all the requirements, can you quickly go over what the requirements are to head toward there? Did you start with a CCNA first?
Well, I do have a CCNA. I have a CCNP. I actually did the CCDA at Networkers 1 year to recertify a bunch of other certifications. But I think that at the time that they came out with the CCIE lab, that the only prerequisite was passing the CCIE written. I don't think that they had any prerequisites for having the CCNP wireless or any of that track because they hadn't developed that yet when they came out with the CCIE lab. And I'm not sure if those are a new prerequisite because, I mean, I don't have those. I haven't taken those tests. So
you have just a regular routing and switching CCNA?
Yeah, and a CCNP in routing and switching, which was very difficult taking those tests and not really being able to use that knowledge in the workplace. It was really hard to do like the ISDN and the dial plan stuff when I'd never really done that before and couldn't really practice it a whole lot in the workplace.
So you kind of took those and then you jumped right in. Let's start with the written exam. What was your prep process for getting ready for the written?
The written exam was reading through all of the white papers, looking at the notes section whenever they have that little pencil out in the margin. That's a really important thing to pay attention to because it's some little hidden gotcha. Well, it's not really hidden, but you tend to gloss over those things thinking it's just, some other little tidbit of information you don't need to know. So I did a lot of reading of their white papers and their design and deployment guides. All of that recommended documentation that they recommend that you read. I know it's probably like 50 PDFs. They mean it when they say read it. But I've been using WCS an awfully long time, and I've been using autonomous access points and lightweight access points since like the 3.0 code. So I had a pretty good feel for what they were going to be asking me, and the test met my expectations.
Well, good. And so compared to your CCNP tests, harder, easier? About the same?
I think the CCNP was much harder because it was technology that I wasn't intimately familiar with. I hadn't used it day in and day out.
Well, you've also, your CWNE number 51. So
yes.
For some of our audience have taken the CWNE test. How do you compare it with that?
The CWNE was much more at the packet level. You had to know a lot about packet analysis and understand the packet captures and look at the frames that were being traded back and forth between the AP and the station. And it was harder to get my mind around the CWNP terminology for things because I'm used to the Cisco terminology for things in relation to a Wi-Fi network. So there was some other words that they used to describe things that I was not familiar with. So it was a little bit more difficult. And I thought it was really interesting that at the time when I took the CWNE, I took the older exam before they phased it out. I thought it was interesting that you had to write a couple of papers about work that you'd done and have people vouch for you. And I was pretty impressed with the process that they used before you actually got a number from CWNP.
That's true. Having worked on those on the exam process and reviewed a lot of those, having that extra experiential piece in there helped. yes, you could pass the test, but you also have to be in the industry and get some people to vouch for you. So that's
yes, and that was another thing that I thought was interesting because I said, "This is me. I can do this because I have the work experience." And so you kind of fall into it headlong and just do it.
All right. So written, you got that done about how long ago?
That was at Networkers last year when it was in San Francisco.
And so after that, you said, "Now I'm going to start getting ready for the lab."
Yeah, and I didn't realize that I probably should have signed up for the lab a lot sooner than I did because I didn't realize that there was such a delay between when you go looking for a lab date and when the lab date's actually available. I wasn't aware of that until somebody I knew had told me that they had just signed up and the date that they could only get was January. And at that time, I think that was like 5 or 6 months out, or maybe even longer. So I said, "Wow, let me go get a date because that's crazy that it's that far out."
Oh, did it help having the date as this time sitting out there that you had to be ready for?
It definitely does, especially when you reach the 90-day point and you have to pay for it. That really brings it home.
The cash leaves and there it goes. So, yeah. And you have to pay for it. So how much is the lab?
It's $1,400.
Plus your travel and everything on top of that.
Yep. Plus your travel and everything on top of that.
You got to really want it. Sounds like you really want it.
I do really want it.
And you've got another one scheduled already. How many wireless CCIEs are out there as you took the test?
The last time I heard was a couple of weeks ago. I heard that there were 20 that had passed total.
Well, no wonder you like this as a goal. That puts you up in
yes
in the stratosphere.
Yes,
so to speak. Good. Okay, so the lab's coming. You have months to prepare. How did you go about preparing?
Well, I go about preparing by doing things that I've never done with 1242 APs, turning them into bridges and doing all kinds of strange security methods with them to secure the links. And there's all kinds of strange scenarios that I've never seen in the actual real world that were in the lab, and rereading the information that they said to read the first time around because it became very obvious to me the things that I thought were important weren't what they thought was important. So I went back through and reread my notes and the things that I highlighted. It's like, nope, let me use a different color highlighter because that stuff's not what they were looking for. So now I have a whole list of notes of what I need to improve on. I definitely need to improve upon my speed at the command line. If you can whip through a complicated configuration of a controller or an autonomous access point via the command line without ever having to go to the GUI, you're going to be in business. Because that is the fastest way to replicate a config across multiple controllers without having, a WCS to make a template for you. You can just slap it into Notepad and do a find replace on the strategic octets and VLAN numbers and keep on going. So
what was your process of preparing? What kind of steps did you take to get ready to go?
Well, I tried to look at the pieces of hardware that were in the hardware list that's in the lab from Cisco's website, and I tried to get as many of those pieces together as I could. But I'm working with what my employer has to offer as spare pieces, which there weren't a lot of spare pieces. So I had one 4402 controller. I had a couple of access points at 1140 and a 1250, which I know aren't. The 1140 is not on the hardware list, but at the time I didn't have a 1250. So I was trying to cobble together what I thought would maybe help, and I walked through some of the authentication configuration on the ACS server and trying to get familiar with mousing around in there, which I probably should have done more of that because when it came to that segment, I was kind of at a loss because I felt like I was running out of time and hitting that proverbial wall where you shouldn't change anything major. So I need to go back to the drawing board on configuring security on ACS. And it turns out that I didn't have all the pieces of the hardware that I should have had. Like I didn't have, a router to simulate a WAN link with a stub network on the other end. So now I have access to a few resources that people have set up where they have labs that you can use, and I've joined a couple of virtual study groups. So I'll be able to get more hands-on to a better topology that's representative of what's in the lab.
Could you send over some of the links to your study groups and other places where if other people want to know where to go to look?
Oh,
and
sure,
we'll add
sure
those
I can.
to the show notes as well.
Sure, I can.
Yeah, I know you also have a blog where you're keeping up some of your notes as well. And so if you could send along we'll obviously put your link in the show notes, but anything else you've got, we can add in there and let's share the information.
Sure.
Yeah, I kind of figure information is kind of like manure. If you hide it and keep it, it just stinks. But if you spread it around, it helps things to grow. So
yes, I agree.
Yeah, that's actually a quote from a movie, but it sounds good. It sounds good here. So what's next for you now that you prepped, you studied, you went and sat the lab, you had the experience, and you've got another one, did you say, in March coming up?
Yeah, in March 13th. But now I'm kind of entering the point where I need to get faster. And I joked with a couple of friends of mine saying that, I feel like I'm entering the Olympic time trials, where once I get the config down, I need to have it memorized and know all of the pieces and parts as separate sections should, one piece not be necessary according to the lab scenario that I'm looking at. And I feel like, I need to have somebody start the stopwatch and just go. How fast can I do this? How much time do I need to actually configure a bridge link with EAP fast and local radius and multiple VLANs and the voice preference on an SSID and all of this crazy stuff that they want you to do on a bridge link, which I've never done anything more than just span a VLAN between buildings. So yeah, I feel like I'm entering the Olympic time trials. How quickly can I do this? How quickly can I configure a controller for multiple SSIDs and blah, 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 and just get my time down so that I know that I can do a really good, clean, complicated configuration on a controller in a really short amount of time. So that will leave time for me to use the ACS and configure the security there and do all of the other GUI stuff, which takes a little bit longer than just typing at a command line.
So what I'm hearing is one of the things you got out of the first cycle through the lab experience was there's time pressure.
Oh, definitely.
What's something else you learned that you didn't know before you went in?
Well, I was the only one there taking the wireless exam. They have 2 pods, and I was at pod 1, and it wasn't immediately obvious which shortcut I was supposed to use to be able to get to the virtual PC or the VNC connection to the PC where I could actually web into the controllers or web into one of the APs on the bridge link. And so I lost some time because I wasn't familiar with how the desktop was actually laid out for the lab. And I probably should have asked questions about that sooner or asked the proctor to explain it to me sooner, but I thought I was going to have plenty of time. And then I got to the point after lunch where I rebooted the controller and all hell broke loose and I had to scramble to put everything back together again. And I realized that half hour or so that while I was doing something else that, I should have been webbing into things was lost, and I really needed that half hour.
So is that something that's under the NDA, or is that something you can share of how that process that you learned of how to VNC in?
Well, no, it's not part of it. It's just a standard desktop that you're presented with shortcuts. And I think everybody that's it's not anything secret because it didn't say, what exactly the tasks were that I needed to do. But people are pretty familiar with it. You get a desktop with shortcuts to things and you have to know which to click to where. And I should have asked the proctor sooner, how do I web into the controller now that I have it up and online?
Because that really wasn't anything to do with the exam. It was just
it was just the technicality of being able, how do I get into the controller?
Are you going to replicate that in your lab experience now as well?
Oh, definitely. I'm going to try and do all of the configuration that I can from the CLI, so I won't have to worry about webbing into things. I can just skip all of that time waste that I did, because when you web into, say, a 1242 AP, the lag that there is when you're configuring something through the GUI is painful. It's so painful. It's so much quicker and easier to just do it from the CLI.
And that's where you're going to get your speed back.
Yes, and my time, I'll get a lot of extra time by being able to do it from the CLI, not having to wait for the screen to refresh.
So, what's next?
What's next?
You're practicing, and March 13th, the big day coming up.
Yes. Actually, it's not March, it's May, excuse me.
May. Oh, I was going to say March, May that's 13th. Like 3 weeks from now.
Yeah, that's like 3 weeks from now. No, it's actually May. It's May 13th.
Oh, now I can breathe a little easier. I was like, wow.
I was like, wait a minute, what did I say? Yeah. So it's coming up in May.
Well, we'll be definitely rooting for you, and I want to, in fact, after your next lab, could we have you come back and
of course.
Tell us of your success?
Of course, I'm hoping I'm going to come away with digits.
That's the goal.
That is the goal.
Well, thanks for having you coming on and talking with us today. Anything else you want to say, words of encouragement or help for anyone else who's looking to take the wireless CCIE exam?
I think it's very doable. I mean, especially if you've had many years of experience of working with Cisco's hardware and software. there'll be a lot that you'll be able to bring to the test that you already know, that you won't actually have to study for. You'll just have to fill in the gaps of where your knowledge is and what you're not exactly comfortable configuring because you haven't really had to. Because typically your wireless LAN deployment isn't that complicated, considering all of the scenarios that the lab wants you to be able to implement. So it's definitely different than any other lab topology that you'll ever see.
Well, and what they're testing is that uniqueness that can you adapt?
Yes.
Can you adapt
Yes.
and do everything, not just the things you normally do?
Can you apply what you know in a completely different way?
Quickly.
Yes.
That's what makes you the expert, and so you get the little E there.
Exactly.
Well, we wish you luck in your process, and we'll be following along, and we'll take the links, and anyone else who wants to follow along, track down the links that will be in the show notes, and we'll follow up with this in a couple months. Thanks again, Jennifer.
Hey, thank you.
Elevator speech. Our guests have just 2 minutes to tell us all about their product or service offering. Ready, set, go.
This is Ben Miller, and I work for Global Knowledge as the wireless course director. That means I'm responsible for writing the courses, putting together labs, etc., for all courses on vendor-neutral wireless networking. Global Knowledge is a IT training provider. They also offer a variety of courses having to do with security, networking in general. They even go beyond that to things like project management as well.
Hey, being a professional means more than just knowing the technical. Now it's time to soften up and talk about the non-techie side for a minute. Slow down, put your feet up, and listen up to these items to help you on the professional side. Enjoy.
Hello again, this is Keith Parsons, and today for our soft skills segment, we've got Ed Schlichtenmyer back again. Ed will be talking to us this week about 4 steps to enhance your reputation. And coming from Ed, that's a pretty good thing. Ed's got a great reputation out in the industry, and have been working with him for many years, and glad to have you back again. Ed, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Keith. Thank you for inviting me back. This is really a fun and worthwhile experience. I've listened to other podcasts on industry topics, and I think you're going in the right direction where it's a good professional quality piece of work. It's also good for me. I've always heard that if you want to learn something, you need to teach it. And it's also part of building and maintaining your own professional status and being active and open in reviewing and learning and building on one's craft. So I'm just real pleased to be participating. I'm looking at books that I haven't looked at in years and reviewing materials that I haven't looked at in a long time. And it's good to get back and sharpen the saw.
Well, I'm glad we can be part of your saw sharpening.
Yeah.
Well, that's a tough one to say fast.
Right. It is. So this is about some steps towards helping you enhance your reputation around the office with your clients, with your fellow coworkers, and so on. Reputation consists of many different components and attributes, but for our purposes and from the perspective of a network professional, I've distilled it to 4 that I really want to touch on today. The first is integrity. The second is inspiring commitment. Third is communicating with people. And 4 is managing projects. And I've picked those 4 because they really speak to what it is that a network professional does. They have projects. So how do you get the project running? Well, you need to be able to communicate with people. In order to communicate, you need to display some integrity, and the integrity that you display will allow you to inspire for commitment into making those projects run. So they're very closely interrelated, I believe. With respect to integrity, that we've heard a lot about, and it's very important that you realize that it's simply just a function of being authentic to yourself and standing for your values and your principles. There's a story that's real interesting to me that I'd heard 10, 12 years ago. It comes from the early 50s when Motorola was doing about $100 million of work a year. They had an opportunity in South America, $10 million contract. However, when the executive came back to report on the progress, he indicated that they'd won the deal, provided that they made it read 11 million, so the generals in that particular South American country could skim the million off the top. The executive said he was sorry that happened, and he refused the contract, even if they dropped to the original price. And he also further indicated they would no longer do business with that country until there was a change in leadership. Pretty impressive, don't you think, Keith?
Yeah, to even give up not just the profit that was there, but to make the statement that you believe in integrity not only for yourself, but for others.
That's right. You take a strong stand like that, and people will understand that you mean what you say and say what you mean. So it's very important. I mean, it's worthwhile. Your people will see it when you take a stand on integrity. Your face will lighten up. You'll become more enthused with energy and vitality. People will recognize that, see that, and a sense of trust will develop for you. The second item is inspiring commitment. Once you have established and lived that in life of integrity, of standing for what you believe in and holding true to what's important to you, others will notice. They'll see that you feel good. They'll see that you're authentic. And it'll be much simpler for you to inspire commitment in working with someone in order to get things like buy-in. We work on getting buy-in in every area of life: family, play, work. And if you've ever noticed, if you're trying to play a game and you get somebody that decides they don't want to play, they don't want to be there, it'll just destroy that game for you. And so at work, we need to think about it in terms of trying to keep people plugged in together. So inspiring commitment is worthwhile. And so you need to be able to recognize some commitment problems. Often as a consultant, we get called in because people are having troubles working together on an engagement, and often it starts with a lack of buy-in to a project or an assignment or a vision. Leaders typically don't take the time to solicit input, and that's really what it boils down to. People get resistant, they'll hear something, and then they'll just swallow their communication and not try to respond or reach out. And so the solution, in order to make this work for you, is you need to get skilled at recognizing the signals of non-commitment. The best way to do that is watch body language. I've found that people will avert eyes, so their arms will cross. You've heard those traditional ones. Keith, can you think of any that you'd like to point out that you've seen over the years?
I think that looking away, not looking at you in the eyes, is a pretty good one. Turning their head down and usually making no sounds. They don't answer.
Right. Yes, exactly. And the thing to remember is they're not necessarily antagonistic, but they may be feeling some fear that they won't be able to deliver. So that creates tension inside. Or they're anxious that the resources they need won't be available. Sometimes time-consuming projects get into the personal life, and especially with our, dare I say it, our younger generation workforce have a completely different mindset on what's appropriate in terms of requesting overtime or requesting them to do weekend work. And so there's a lot of issues there that we need to be sensitive to. So if you see that, it's important in order to help inspire commitment that you create an environment where they feel comfortable in discussing what their concerns are and that you really listen and hear. So that takes us to communicating. With respect to communicating with people, genuine communication is only possible if you're fully present, being there in that space, in that moment, engaging in a conversation with someone else. We've talked about integrity. That's kind of the foundation. Once you start having your integrity displayed, people will notice, they will recognize. It'll be easier for you to inspire that commitment. They'll want to come along with you because, hey, you've got a good attitude, you're trustworthy. And now that they're willing to come along, let's make the communication work so that we make certain we get to where we're headed. We touched on this before, and it's worth revisiting. The idea that you need to be authentic. You need to be who you are and communicate just that way. There's no sense in trying to make stuff up. There's no sense in trying to be insincere. It's very important that you just reach out and do some plain talking and try to understand what the other has to say.
But what if you don't know who you are? You said be authentic, be who you are. What if you don't really know who you are yet?
Oh, that's a great point. The first step in becoming a leader is to try to find out who you are. And that's done through soul-searching, meditation. Your thoughts, Keith?
Oh, I don't know. You probably don't want to ask me that one because I believe an examined life is not worth living.
Well, there is something to that as well. You'll find, though, that if you have a problem with being authentic, it'll be manifest in people not listening to you. Does that make sense?
It does. I was just joking on that.
That's a point at which you can start to think, hey, why aren't they listening to me? Turn some thoughts inward and start to think about maybe you're being authentic or not. But as one thing I always value about working with you, Keith, is you find the right time to insert some levity and make things fun. Appreciate that.
Well, then moving on, after you have the communication, you're working with people, you'd mentioned moving on to projects. And that's really what a lot of network professional folks, that's, their lifeblood of what they're doing.
Absolutely. Oh, yes. What we're doing is building on different pieces towards how to manage projects. And it's all about being able to do course corrections. All right, you're going to manage projects. And no matter how good you are or how experienced you are, there are going to be wins and there are going to be losses. So how you respond to those things is just as important as how you manage the project all along. Pay close attention after a big success, just like you do after a big loss. You're wide open to various vulnerabilities because you're in new territory. When you have had a big success, you need to slow down a little, take a breath, recenter yourself. The same thing that you would do in a time of a big loss or any kind of loss. But go through and examine exactly how you feel about it, what occurred, what went on, and make certain that you get the responsibility formula right.
Yeah, what did you mean by responsibility formula?
Exactly. That formula, most people have a tendency to think others messed up the project, or it wasn't me, or that there's just can only be one or two or three issues that could cause a problem or be a success. But the truth is that every situation, if you have two people involved in a project, there's 200% responsibility involved. If you have three, it's 300. And so there are ratios of responsibility along the way, and everyone on that team has an obligation to try to do their best and to help the others do their best. So you need to think about how you can motivate others to do their 100%. Usually delegation, if you're involved in leadership capacity, helps. As long as you're comfortable and you feel that the people are fundamentally equal in a project and you're able to delegate, then you'll be able to work through that process comfortably. About responsibility, it never is constructive to stop and point fingers and place blame. It's always important to look at the process that led to the issue or difficulty.
Both in a positive and a negative light.
That's absolutely right. Yes.
Whether it's a failure or a success, you still need to go back and track down the processes and make sure you can readjust those to either continue them or change them in the case of a failure.
Correct. There are course corrections quite often, quite frequently. Then also with respect to projects, a component is the communication, as I mentioned earlier. Retaining high potential people, high quality people on your team is really a function of making certain that you understand what motivates them and being able to give them the opportunity to take off and run with a particular task that you've delegated so that they are happy and satisfied, thinking about the Maslow's hierarchy.
Get them to climb that pyramid as high as they can.
That's right. That's exactly right. So those are a couple of pieces, just quick little highlights with respect to handling projects. When people are not producing, it's usually because they're somehow out of integrity with themselves. They don't know it necessarily. It could be subconscious, but something's not right. Complainers usually complain because they're out of their integrity. And the way to resolve that is to work on that communication. Once again, create an environment where they feel comfortable. They can come to you and fix it. So that's pretty much all I have.
That's good.
Anything?
Yeah. Well, and again, just to recap, what we're looking at here was ways you can enhance your reputation. And by starting with yourself and making sure you start with the integrity, then you can have respect for yourself first. And then from there, you're going to inspire others through the commitment that they're going to join. And you asked a question earlier with some ways you can tell whether or not they're buying into the commitment. And I think it's the amount of energy and passion. If they don't see the same passion and energy you have on a project, you can probably guess that they're not going to have that same level of commitment that you do.
That's true. Yes.
Well, good. That's a good recap there. And I think Ardian spends a lot of time working on projects, and we talked about some of the things there. Your responsibility for me, I'd like to augment that a little bit and say the responsibility for success is usually others, and the responsibility for failure is usually yourself. And if you can own up with that one, I think you'll continue to get more and more people committed with you if they see that that's the kind of attitude you take.
Well said. That succinctly put, well said.
Well, thanks for your time again today, Ed. We'll have you come back in the future and talk on some other topics to help wireless LAN professionals be more of the professional side. So thanks for your time. And, oh, by the way, you're in Houston. Just wanted to recap where you're at today.
Oh, yes, Houston, Texas. It's a nice, sunny, 63-degree day.
I went out for my walk this morning in a snowstorm. So a little different world we live in, but via the wonders of the internet and technology, we get to share our time together today. So I appreciate your time.
I appreciate it too. Thank you, Keith.
Thanks. Well, back again with Keith Parsons here, finishing up, wrapping up the episode number 9 on Wireless LAN Weekly. And if you have any kind of feedback whatsoever, you can give feedback at feedback@wirelesslanprofessionals.com. We welcome your feedback and ideas. And if you are like a couple of people who have recommended some individuals to have on our show, feel free to give us some ideas on what you'd like to see. So we'd like to thank Jennifer and Ed for their expertise and their time today. And we look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks again.
Wireless LAN Weekly, a podcast focused on the needs of wireless LAN professionals. We look forward to your feedback. Please leave your comments at the bottom of the show notes, or email feedback on the show can be sent to feedback@wirelesslanprofessionals.com. If you'd like to leave a voicemail feedback, just call 24/7 and leave a message at 1-801-481-9018. Until next time, this has been another production of wirelesslanprofessionals.com, a place to educate, inform, entertain, and inspire.